drawing more fans from all over the world. Local consumer prices continue to hover at the 2% rate in April.
Turning to robots to allow the visually impaired the chance to better indulge in cultural experiences. Like the number of hybrid cars are registered in South Korea has surpassed 2 million with this locally developed Yuri rocket.
Arirang. In our headlines on this Friday, March 20th, here in South Korea. South Korea's 7-member BTS is back with its highly anticipated album titled Arirang, the first in nearly 4 years. And come Saturday evening, BTS returns to stage at Gwanghwamun Square for a comeback concert that is expected to bring together thousands of fans. Meanwhile, the military conflict in the Middle East looks to affect South Korea's imports of liquefied natural gas from Qatar. Today, we start our newscast with the latest on the K-pop front amid the release of BTS's new album titled Arirang just 4 hours ago as the group prepares for a comeback concert tomorrow evening in downtown Seoul. Our Park Chun-han starts us off.
K-pop boy band BTS released the 14-track full album Aridang at 1 p.m. Korean time on Friday with the title track Swim. BTS members took an active hands-on role throughout the production of Aridang, contributing to songwriting across most tracks and collaborating with top global producers. In a live stream to mark the album's release, BTS members said they intentionally incorporated Korean elements into the album and explained the significance behind the title Arirang.
정체성, 우리다운 건 무엇인가?
우린 무엇인가?
방탄스러운 건 또 무엇이고 하다가 또 요즘에는 여러 국적을 가진 팀도 되게 많고 한데 우린 또 다 한국 사람이고 하니까 한국스러운 걸 좀 넣어보면 좋지 않을까라는 말이 그때 되게 많이 나왔던 것 같아요.
근데 어떤 사람한테는 어떤 저항이나 한의 상징이면서 어떤 사람들한테는 애환이나 그런 그리움에 대한 노래이고 그래서 여러 가지 정서가 깔려있기 때문에
맞아요.
저희가 표현하려는 다양한 감정들을 잘 담아낼 수 있는.
A standout moment comes in the first track Body to Body, where the latter part of the song features a subtle yet powerful interpolation of the melody from the traditional Korean folk song Aridang. It doesn't end with sampling. BTS bring the folk song into a modern reimagining that weaves in the soul of Korea's most iconic tune, symbolizing longing, reunion, and resilience. Park Chun-han, Arirang News.
Right, we are counting down roughly 27 hours to the start of BTS's comeback concert at Gwanghwamun Square. And for a better sense of the atmosphere on the ground at this hour, I have Arirang's Jong Hae-rim standing by live. Hae-rim, welcome. So what's it like there as we speak?
Yes, Sunny. So as you can see behind me, hundreds of fans are already here at Gwanghwamun Square, even though the concert doesn't start until 8 p.m. tomorrow. At this very venue, all 7 members of BTS will perform together for the first time since completing their military service. Preparations are in the final stages. The main stage and seating areas are already set up, and staff members are busy making their final rounds. BTS will be performing tracks from their new release, their 5th studio album, Arirang, including Swim, which was released Friday, as well as some of their biggest classic hits. Let's hear from some fans or ARMYs who are excited for this historic event.
So I'm really excited because I'm from Switzerland, and the first time I heard about Korea, it was through BTS. So I'm really excited to be able to witness such an important event for Korea.
Oh, it's amazing. It's like very historic. So I understand why so many people would come and see it because it's legendary.
I was waiting for years for this moment, so I'm so excited too. And you? I've been in ARMY for almost 10 years now, so this is my first time seeing BTS live. So I'm so excited for tomorrow. Yay!
Oh my, it seems like we have fans from every corner of the globe at Gwanghwamun Square right now. And speaking of this historic location, Herim, do tell us a bit about the layout of the concert there, especially keeping in mind the reality that it is not a typical concert area.
Yes, that's right, Sunny. Unlike typical concert stages where the seats are close to the stage, Gwanghwamun Square is long and narrow. And because of this, most fans won't be able to see directly the stage and will have to see the group through pre-installed LED screens. But there is a deeply symbolic reason behind choosing this specific location, because the stage is positioned right along the historic central axis of Seoul, often referred to as the King's Road, with Gyeongbokgung Palace serving as the ultimate backdrop. Whether the BTS members will physically walk down this path themselves tomorrow night, or if this King's Road entrance will be revealed through a pre-produced video, is something we will have to wait and see right here at the venue.
Right, indeed. Herim, and before you go, what's the latest regarding an injury suffered by group leader RM?
Yes, Sunny, Big Hit announced today that RM injured his ankle during a rehearsal yesterday, which requires him to wear a cast. And that has caused worry among fans about whether he'll be there tomorrow. However, the leader personally reassured everyone. He explained that he pushed himself a bit too hard, and while he won't be able to participate in the intense choreography, he is determined to perform and will absolutely still be on stage tomorrow night. So we'll definitely be able to see all 7 members on stage. That's all I have from Gwanghwamun. Back to you, Sunny.
All right, Herim, thank you for that coverage. Right, authorities, including government officials as well as HYBE employees, conducted an on-site inspection of the venue of BTS's comeback concert today. They checked on measures aimed at crowd control that is, and emergency response. Up to 260,000 fans are expected to gather, prompting an unprecedented stadium-level safety plan that includes the deployment of 6,500 police officers, hundreds of emergency personnel, and multiple controlled entry points with metal detectors. Road closures and subway bypasses are also planned. BTS's planned return to stage has triggered a tangible surge in the number of young foreign visitors to South Korea. Our Kim Jun-hong covers this reality.
As BTS gears up for a long-awaited performance in Central Seoul on Saturday, fans from around the world are already arriving, eager to witness what many are calling historic.
To watch if we can get near there, so it's very happy. As long as we are part of the history comeback.
Tickets aren't a requirement for everyone. For many fans, visiting BTS's home country alone holds special meaning.
For many years, so knowing that they're coming back, it's really an amazing feeling.
We didn't get the ticket. A movie night together with other friends.
Their visit and meaningful journey to the birthplace of BTS is a trend that's reflected in the numbers. Foreign arrivals to South Korea have surged by more than 30% this March from a year earlier. According to data from the Ministry of Justice, nearly 1.1 million foreigners entered the country between March 1st and 18th, up roughly 32.7% on year. Such a spike is widely attributed to a rise in visitors ahead of BTS's comeback concert on Saturday, with arrivals expected to climb further as last-minute travelers are not yet fully reflected in the data. The increase was particularly pronounced among teenagers and people in their 20s, a core part of BTS's global fan base. Arrivals in these groups jumped 40% and 35.2% respectively, exceeding the overall growth rate. By region, Asia accounted for the largest share of arrivals at about 910,000, followed by North America, Europe, and Oceania. Arrivals rose across all regions except Africa, with Europe seeing a standout increase of 51%. In response to the surge, authorities have introduced special measures to streamline entry procedures. Additional immigration counters are being deployed during peak arrival times, along with extended staffing to shorten wait times and support tourism and local businesses. Kim Jun-hong, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, an AI-based tour assistance platform has been launched to better accommodate the surge in foreign travelers to South Korea. The mobile web service titled K-Trip One offers both first-time and repeat travelers guidance across the country's major tourist destinations by combining digital trip planning with on-ground assistance. It delivers content tailored to overseas visitors' interests while providing personalized travel information based on their length of stay. The platform also connects users with medical support, including access to a medical call center staffed by healthcare professionals. U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi sat down at the White House on Thursday local time amid the unrest in the Middle East. Our Ising-jae covers their remarks to members of the media ahead of their summit.
U.S. President Donald Trump has called on Japan to step up its support as the United States works to keep the Strait of Hormuz open amid the ongoing war involving Israel and Iran. Speaking during a meeting with Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi at the White House on Thursday, Trump noted Japan's heavy reliance on the strategic waterway for its energy imports. He also pointed to the long-standing security relationship between the two allies, highlighting the presence of roughly 45,000 U.S. troops stationed in Japan. Trump said he expects Tokyo to play a greater role, stressing that the United States has invested significant resources in defending Japan. He added that he would not be surprised if Japan increases its support, though he did not specify what form such assistance might take. The Strait of Hormuz, which carries about 1/5 of the world's oil supply, has effectively been choked off by the intensifying conflict. The disruption has fueled concerns over rising global oil prices and mounting inflationary pressure. Japan is particularly vulnerable, with more than 90% of its crude oil imports passing through the strait. Trump also drew attention after responding to a question from a Japanese journalist about why Washington did not inform its European and Asian allies in advance of strikes on Iran.
Well, one thing you don't want to signal too much. You know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay? Why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay? Right? You know, he's asking me, do you believe in surprise? I think much more so than us.
For her part, Prime Minister Takaichi underscored the importance of preventing Iran from developing nuclear weapons while condemning Tehran's attacks across the Middle East. She reaffirmed Japan's commitment to regional stability and close cooperation with the United States as tensions continue to rise.
Japan condemns Iran's actions, such as attacking the neighboring region and also the effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, as a matter of fact. My fellow minister, Foreign Minister Motegi, also had a direct exchange with the Iranian foreign minister and urged Iran to stop such activities.
The Prime Minister added that she firmly believes President Trump is the only leader capable of achieving global peace, citing what she described as an increasingly severe international security environment. Ising-jae, Arirang News.
And that volatile security environment in the Middle East looks to affect South Korea's imports of liquefied natural gas from Qatar. Our An Sung-jin explains.
Fears over a global energy crisis intensify after major energy facilities in the Middle East were damaged. Qatar Energy announced on Friday that it may invoke force majeure on long-term LNG contracts with key importers including South Korea, China, Italy, and Belgium for up to 5 years. Its CEO said the decision comes after a direct attack on its critical LNG infrastructure in Ras Laffan Industrial City. The strike by Iran targeted a facility responsible for roughly 20% of global LNG supply. 2 LNG production lines and 1 gas-to-liquids facility were destroyed. The damage knocked out 17% of Qatar Energy's total export capacity, with repairs expected to take 3 to 5 years. According to Qatari authorities, the attack is estimated to cut the country's annual output by approximately 12.9 million tons. This attack came as a retaliatory strike by Iran on energy infrastructure across Gulf states, including Qatar, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia.
Unfortunately, this act of sabotage reflects nothing but an aggressive and irresponsible policy and a dangerous escalation by the Iranian side.
South Korea is one of the largest importers of Qatari LNG. Although it has diversified supply sources to include the US and Australia, Qatar still accounts for roughly 20% of its imports, with long-term contracts covering about 6.1 million tons annually. The state-run Korea Gas Corporation stated that current reserves exceed mandatory levels and can sustain demand through the end of the year. And on Friday morning, the Blue House said that Qatar accounts for about 14% of Seoul's LNG imports this year, and that alternative suppliers are available. It added that with uncertainty increasing, the government will closely monitor supply and prices and respond as needed. However, prolonged disruptions could force countries into fierce competition for limited LNG supplies on the spot market, driving up prices not only for industrial sectors, but also energy costs for households. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Across the border, North Korea's Kim Jong-un attended a test drill of a new battle tank with his daughter by his side. Our senior correspondent Oh Seong covers this latest show of strength and its broader implications.
Kim Jong-un has claimed North Korea's new battle tank has unmatched capabilities as he attended a drill that showcased his push for high-tech weaponry, while again placing his teenage daughter into the spotlight. The North Korean Central News Agency reported Friday that Kim oversaw a joint offensive tactical drill by infantry and tank subunits at a military training base in Pyongyang. At the center of the exercise was a new tank equipped with an active protection system, which the North says can automatically detect and intercept incoming anti-tank missiles and drones. State media claimed the system showed a 100% hit rate, striking threats approaching from multiple directions. The report also said drones were used to hit enemy command points and anti-armor positions based on real-time reconnaissance. South Korea's Unification Ministry said Friday that the drill seems to be a reaction to the 11-day Freedom Shield regular exercise between Seoul and Washington.
There was no specific mention of South Korea and the U.S., but as it was held during their joint military drill, it seems to be responsive to that.
But analysts say the significance goes beyond a simple response to Allied drills.
North Korea is no longer focusing only on nuclear weapons. It is also pushing to modernize its conventional weapons. At the core of that is a rapid shift toward digital and AI-based systems. That's what draws our attention. In this latest tank drill, the North highlighted a remote integrated automated fire control system, suggesting the tank is no longer just an armored vehicle, but is being turned into an advanced combat platform.
Also drawing attention were photos of Kim's daughter Chue riding in the tank alongside her father. This comes after she was recently photographed firing a pistol and a rifle.
Kim Jong-un appears to be symbolically passing on his own leather jacket and tank to his daughter. Until last year, Kim Jue was mostly presented as an observer, but now she's shown as more than that. It seems they're intent on building the image of a future warrior and commander.
Carefully staged as it may be, the drill perhaps offers an insight into how Kim Jong-un is envisioning and shaping the future of his regime and military capabilities. Oh Seong, Arirang News.
Back here in South Korea, President Lee Jae-myung says that small and medium-sized enterprises are key to sustainable economic growth. During a meeting with small business owners at the Blue House on Friday, he noted that SMEs account for 99% of all businesses and around 80% of employment here in South Korea. He said that while large corporations often draw more attention, supporting SMEs is equally important as they're the backbone of the economy. The president also called for efforts to curb unfair practices targeting SMEs, such as technology theft. And President Lee Jae-myung and First Lady Kim Hae-kyung hosted South Korea's Paralympic team for lunch at the Blue House on this Friday, following their performance at the 2026 Winter Games in Italy.
우리 대한민국을 대표해 한계를 뛰어넘는 도전으로 우리 국민과 전 세계인들에게 뜨거운 감동과 자부심을 안겨준 대한민국 국가대표 선수단 여러분, 정말로 수고 많으셨습니다. 여러분 한 분 한 분이 모두 참으로 자랑스럽습니다.
Speaking at the luncheon, President Lee said the government will step up support for parasports so that people with disabilities can build confidence and find a sense of accomplishment through sports. South Korea recorded its best ever result at the Winter Paralympics, winning 2 gold, 4 silver and 1 bronze medal. And culinary diplomacy is taking shape here as a large contingent of French chefs is currently in the southern part of the country seeking Korean ingredients for French dishes. Our culture correspondent Park Gonu files this report.
Savoring one by one, these French chefs explore the depth of Korean flavors, even in the cold rain. From tofu wraps to Korean herb pancakes, oak mushrooms and dried radish kimchi, they sample each dish with curiosity while asking a lot of questions. Nodding in approval and with a thumbs up, they capture every moment with their camera phones. In partnership with the master chefs of France, Jeollanam-do province and private companies, around 200 French chefs are touring places like Changsong and Damyeongun County for about a week, exploring local ingredients they could bring back home.
Here in this region, you make a lot of very good product. I use some of them in my kitchen. I love the soy sauce and especially the soy sauce and kimchi. Kimchi in my region, we make something similar, but I prefer kimchi.
Korean tofu is very different from French tofu. I'd love to use it in my dishes, maybe in a fusion style.
Led by monk Jong-un, they even dive into the sustainable philosophy of temple cuisine, learning to better understand and appreciate the local ingredients before their meal.
Renowned chefs like them usually source their ingredients directly from farms or use organic produce. So this is a good opportunity to connect with local farmers to understand each other's needs and build partnerships.
And the chef's passion for learning about Korean ingredients doesn't stop at simply tasting them. They go one step further by making traditional Korean soy sauce themselves. They began by stacking fermented soybean blocks into deep jars, then pour in bamboo salt water, a key ingredient in the process, under the lead of a Korean national master artisan of traditional chang. The jars are filled to the brim, ending with a prayer for a successful fermentation. Tasting various soy sauces, the chefs began thinking about using Korean flavors back home.
We are looking for ingredients that are just unique, powerful in tradition, and it helps us to do some very great innovation. Like I'm doing fundraising or gala dinner right now, and I could see doing a special order with the 5-year-old soja sauce that I just got.
Impressed by the quality, the chefs say they've gained inspiration for their creations, even requesting product lists and asking about import timelines and quantities. Demand for soy sauce is especially strong, with some already looking to scale up supply.
And with plans already in motion, Korean flavors are set to reach more tables worldwide. Park Gonu, Arirang News, Damyeon.
Meanwhile, back here in Seoul, the capital city is playing host to a global forum that seeks sustainable strategies to strengthen a global network of productive healthcare. Our Cho Young-eun covers the event.
Hosted by the Ministry of Health and Welfare and the Korea Health Industry Development Institute, Medical Korea 2026 is being held under the theme AI-Powered Global Healthcare, Bringing the Future and the World Closer. The event kicked off with sessions sharing global medical trends and examining how emerging technologies are reshaping the healthcare system. The opening presentation outlined concrete strategies to expand global network participation among medical professionals and leverage AI-based tools for communication.
And all the great leaders that are in this room with us doing great things with AI. And that's what's needed more and more around the world. And I'm glad we're talking about it here in Korea because so many look up to Korea for what you do.
Experts noted that while artificial intelligence is accelerating the globalization of healthcare, key challenges in cross-border medical services still remain. One keynote speaker emphasized that the next phase of global healthcare must move beyond AI toward a more accountable system built on trust between physicians.
One of the most challenging things that we have in the real world care, for example, is the continuity of care to fill the gap, and that is the trusted physician network. And thankfully, when we speak of Korean physicians throughout the world.
Another keynote speaker shared insights from participating in an AI-integrated clinical platform, highlighting its growing impact on the healthcare industry.
We can contribute in shifting the focus on this aesthetic-focused field of medical tourism in Korea currently, and provide care for complex medical conditions. And with the introduction of the AI-assisted platform,
Hospitals from around the country are running promotion booths here to showcase their medical services and build long-term collaborations. The showcase exhibition has introduced a wide range of services from AI-based skin analysis to personalized treatments and counseling. Another key pillar of the event was business meetings for networking between overseas patients and domestic medical institutions, designed to lead to tangible partnerships. Jong-un, Arirang News.
With the sun rising earlier these days, it really feels like spring is settling in. But mornings are still below freezing, with a large day-to-night temperature difference of around 10 to 15 degrees. So be sure not to dress too lightly. Air quality remains fair, making it comfortable to be outdoors. But watch out for frost. It's expected in inland areas tomorrow morning and across central regions on Sunday. So please take extra care of crops and plants. On Sunday, Jeju-do Island may see a brief shower from the afternoon into the evening with less than 5 millimeters of rain. Skies will be mostly clear nationwide with air quality at fair levels. Seoul will start the day at 2 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at -2 degrees, Gyeongju at 1 degree. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 15 degrees, Chuncheon at 16 degrees, and Busan at 16 degrees. We'll continue to see mostly clear skies through tomorrow. Cloud cover will increase nationwide on Sunday, with overcast conditions in the southern regions and on Jeju-do Island. That's all for Korea. Here's a look at the weather around the world.
Right, those are the headlines at this hour. As always, thank you for watching.
From breaking news in South Korea to stories from around the world, we're here to bring you the news that matters.
Truth, clarity, and impartiality. And that's what we uphold in a fast-changing world.
We go beyond the headlines, offering depth, context, and perspective.
This isn't just news, it's our commitment. News you trust. Arirang News.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi meet at the White House on Thursday local time amid the unrest in the Middle East. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Friday, March 20th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi sat down with U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House on Thursday local time for a summit that comes against the backdrop of tensions between the Trump administration and its allies over seeking security in the Strait of Hormuz. For more on this, I have Stephen Borwick with Nikkei Asia here in the studio. Stephen, welcome back.
Nice to be here, thanks.
I also have Thomas Moresco with UPI. Thomas, it's great to have you with us.
Great to be here, thank you.
Stephen, let's start with details about the meeting between these two leaders that is taking place, of course, in Washington, D.C. on Thursday. What aspects of their talks were touched upon by the Japanese media, would you say?
Well, Trump referred to Japan as stepping up to the plate, which I don't think was a reference to the recent World Baseball Classic, but It was very cordial. I mean, Trump mentioned that he had gotten tremendous support from Japan, and he talked up their relationship a lot. And as a lot of foreign leaders who meet with Trump tend to do, Takaichi was very complimentary, and she said that Trump was. I think the quote was, she said he was something like the only person who could bring peace to the world, and all very kind of building him up in the way that I think like the standard diplomatic playbook is that it's wise to. But it was all very, they seem to get along very well. I mean, I know that in the Japanese media there was some kind of concern about the possibility of a Zelensky moment, that Trump may use this as an opportunity to kind of express frustration with Takaichi. And, Trump has been, in recent weeks, griping about what he has perceived as a lack of support from allies for U.S. efforts to calm things in the Straits of Hormuz. He said that it's in these own countries' best interests to show some courage or some resolve and to get involved here. I mean, I know that was that ruffled some feathers because even before he became president, Trump has been like not a huge believer in the concept of alliances. He's not conducted himself as a world leader in a way that demonstrates a great belief in the principles of an alliance, the principles that you help out your allies when it's not even convenient for you or when it's not advantageous to you. You do it out of a spirit of a commitment to the principles of diplomacy and a commitment to this idea that you have shared interests and shared values and all the rest. From the Japanese media side, I know that there was a lot of interest in like just how committal or non-committal Takaichi would be when it came to the possibility of like sending Japanese vessels to the Straits of Hormuz to kind of patrol there or to escort ships or to kind of try to ensure safety there. That's a very big question in Japan because Japan, as we all know, Japan has this pacifist constitution. It's like legally bound to not undertake military operations that are seen as aggressive or that are seen as participating in wars. It's only on a kind of self-defense basis. So we didn't seem to get any. I mean, I guess if you're on both sides, you have to be fairly satisfied with the outcome, as we understand it so far, because there was not any kind of binding agreement, but everybody came out, not having lost face. Everybody came out like putting forth a kind of a unified posture. And, given the kind of trepidation there was in some corners of Japanese media and government and society, I think this is probably a pretty good outcome, one that people are at least tentatively satisfied with.
Right. That being said then, Thomas, what can you tell us about the focus of the American media of this latest summit between the leaders of the U.S. and Japan?
I would say a lot of the American coverage at least started with Trump's surprising comments during their conversation or during the question and answer period when, he was asked basically, why didn't you share the, war plans with your allies? And he said it was, I don't have the exact quote, but, we wanted the element of surprise. Then he mentioned Japan knows something about that and brought up Pearl Harbor, which, Takaichi's response was clearly one that was sort of focused on as well, where you could see her sort of visibly react to it, sort of widen her eyes and stiffen up a bit. And that, that really, I would say, led at least, was at the top of a lot of the coverage, just the shock of that. And, sort of some of the coverage then went into the nature of the relationship with the U.S. and Japan and, how something like Pearl Harbor has not in the past been brought up by previous presidents and how it's just the sort of wartime history has been sort of, it's been addressed in the past, but more is put as something like a tragic thing that happened in a long time ago and not really, bringing it up in current conversation. So, and again, it's sort of one of those things where, the press, I think, has been criticized for it and, probably rightfully so in some sense, where it's like reacting to the latest sort of outrageous thing that Trump says. There's definitely an element of that where, you're kind of chasing the quick headline or the sort of outrageous bit. So there's an element of that. At the same time, it is sort of a shocking thing to say to a diplomatic partner. And then, usually after that, the meat of the story is more about a lot of the things that Stephen mentioned, just the nature of this meeting and where things stand in terms of Japan's helping out with the Strait of Hormuz and what sort of the stakes were, and also that beyond that they do seem to actually get along well. I mean, she does seem to be one of the world leaders that Trump has clicked with more than most others, and in a way it's similar to former Prime Minister Abe. Trump got along very well with him, and she's a bit of cut from the same cloth, and so. And she does seem to know very well how to sort of play the game with Trump, and she was very complimentary of him, and mentioned, as Stephen said, that he's the only one who could achieve peace in the world, and he seems fond of her. He kept calling her like a spectacular woman, and said Japan is back, and it did seem that Japan dodged a bullet in a way, or at least was not put in a position of committing to something that was clearly, would have been an uncomfortable position. So, that all made its way in the story, but I would say certainly the coverage really led with this statement about Pearl Harbor.
Right. In the meantime, Stephen, what more can you tell us about the prospects of Japan sending ships through the Strait of Hormuz for the sake of security?
I can't speculate too much. I mean, I don't know how probable it is that they will actually go ahead with that. But one of the quotes that I noticed in the Nikkei Asia coverage of the meeting was that Prime Minister Takaichi said that she explained to Trump that there are certain things that she can and cannot do under Japanese law. I mean, reading between the lines there, I thought it was funny that she said, well, I explained this because, you would assume that your foreign counterpart would already know this. But, Trump is not a guy who's hitting the books all the time. Maybe he doesn't know this aspect of Japanese law. But there are various views in Japanese society about this. I mean, having spent more time in Japan in recent years, you do get the sense from some people there that the pacifist nature of their state is something that a lot of people think is very precious and that they want to preserve. And then there's another portion of the society who thinks that it's kind of outdated, and that as a kind of middle power, Japan, to fully realize its influence, Japan ought to more fully embrace being a military power. It's definitely increased its defense budget in recent years, if I'm not mistaken. But one thing, the one kind of prominent institutional voice in Japan that's really come out in favor of Japan dispatching vessels to the Middle East is the Sankei Shimbun newspaper. It's a very right-wing kind of paper. And, they published an editorial arguing for this, which I thought it's the kind of editorial where even if you don't agree with what the conclusion that they come to, they do make a pretty reasonable case for it. It is a kind of fairly well-argued piece. And they just point to the fact that Japan, like South Korea, is very dependent on energy imports. This is a non-petroleum producing country with a big manufacturing sector. They are very vulnerable to any kind of geopolitical shock, particularly in the Middle East, because that's where they source a lot of their crude oil from. There's not a lot, and a lot of their liquid natural gas. There's not a lot of immediately available alternatives. And the Sankei editorial, just the case that they made was that Japan can exercise military functions when it finds it as what they call an exercise of collective self-defense, when the country is in what they deem to be a situation that threatens their survival. And so the Sankei Shimbun's case, which you could call, premature or perhaps a bit alarmist, argues that the situation as we see it now in the Middle East is a situation that could rise to the level of threatening Japan's survival just because it relies on these imports so severely. At the moment, I think that so many conversations about this war all come down to the same conclusion of just we don't really know what this is going to mean. It all depends on how long if this is protracted. If you want to fund Google exercise, go and Google Iran Jong-un in Korean, and every Korean news article is but if Jong-un being the Korean word for protraction or something being elongated. If this goes on for a long time. So I really think that the time is the key variable now. I think at least in the present, because Japan and South Korea have fairly big energy reserves, this conversation is not super urgent yet. But if this scenario is prolonged, if oil prices continue to go up, then I think the kind of argument presented by the Sankai will gain traction, and the conversation in Japan may kind of turn more in that direction. But just got to be clear that I'm not making a prediction. I don't actually know.
Right, for sure, for sure. And with regard to South Korea, Thomas, what have you been hearing with regard to the Lee Jae-myung administration's potential response to Mr. Trump's request for warships in the Strait of Hormuz for security?
Yeah, similarly, I mean, I think it is at this point, we've just seen a lot of sort of, it almost is like stalling for time, not committing. You know, most of the official statements that have come out of the president's office and the Ministry of Defense have sort of said, you know, there's been no official request to send ships. Cho Hyun, the foreign minister, was briefing the National Assembly about it, and he had these very kind of, you know, I think he said one could say it is a request or not, you know, just this very neither here nor there. And it does feel like, you know, most allies in general, and certainly, you know, South Korea is in a similar position to Japan as far as being vulnerable to obviously a Middle East, you know, disruption of its oil flow. I don't know the exact number. I've seen different figures, but I think it's something like 70% of the oil from you know, for South Korea comes from the Middle East. So there is a vulnerability to it, but yeah, it's a sense of, you know, can we not commit to something? You know, is this going to be over soon or not? So I think there's been that sense of it. And, you know, certainly with this Takeichi meeting with Trump, I think there was some concern that, oh, you know, if what she says, you know, or what she commits to would put South Korea in a, you know, it's almost like a prisoner's dilemma situation or something, like who's going to be the first to go. So I think the sense that she kept it in this kind of, you know, it's sort of a vague sense of, you know, committing to something, but not exactly, you know, saying what that means or sending warships. I mean, so I think South Korea maybe is breathing a sigh of relief with that. But, you know, it certainly is, you know, it's a really difficult situation. I mean, South Korea is vulnerable, and, you know, you've got the, you know, Washington relationship that you have to worry about. And Trump, you know, South Korea was one of the countries that Trump named in his social media post about these countries should step up, you know, and it was like Japan and South Korea and UK and a couple others. You know, but at the same time, South Korea also has its own interests, and especially in that Gulf region. And it just, you know, within recent years, I think South Korea has been trying to strengthen its own, you know, presence there. And there's a lot of investments. And, you know, so I think it's also Seoul is walking that line of not trying to, you know, come down too strongly on one side or the other. You know, both parties have pointed out it would require parliamentary approval to send, you know, warships there. So I think, you know, it's still at this point is this sense of let's like wait and see. But, you know, obviously if it does continue to draw out, you know, what does that look like? And maybe it is something, you know, if you can avoid sending warships, if it's like escorts or mine clearing or intelligence gathering types of contributions. But yeah, I think it is a really tricky situation to be in.
Right. In the meantime, Stephen, Mr. Trump kept his appointment with his Japanese counterpart, but he postponed that with his Chinese counterpart. There are quite a number of pundits who are choosing to read deeper into the optics of this diplomatic decision, if you will. What are your thoughts?
Well, I wish I was a more educated observer of China, the inner workings of the Chinese state. But the first thing I would say is, before I answer that, is in weighing those two things, we probably should mention that Takeichi traveled to Washington, so it was easier for Trump to just receive her there than it would be for Trump to travel to China. I mean, I know that all overseas trips by U.S. presidents involve, you know, are a very broad and cumbersome endeavor. And I think going to China must be a particularly challenging one. There must be a lot of security and a lot of intelligence things that need to be considered. The question that this raises for me is whether or not China would interpret this as a slight. Is the leadership in Beijing, are they going to interpret this as like this is a sign from Trump that he does not adequately value their relationship? Is this, you know, just the way you would think about a friend who cancels a dinner on you at the last minute? You know, is this inconsiderate? Are you not, you know, valuing my time? Are you not valuing like the, you know, what I've invested in this relationship? I can't speak to that, but I'd love to be a fly on the wall in Beijing and hear their reaction to that on a candid sort of basis. We know that in China, like all kinds of officialdom, whether that be domestic matters or foreign policy matters, carry a lot of symbolism. You know, it's like where do you greet someone, and you know, what facility do you use, and like where does everybody sit at the table? You know, there's a whole industry of people who study these things in China, as people once did in the Soviet Union, and it's all very fascinating. So you have to assume that the Chinese leadership will not simply shrug this off. They will not see this as being totally inconsequential, but the question will be just how serious do they consider this to be? I would say that the Chinese leadership is nothing if not prudent. I mean, I don't think they let you know, perceptions of a slight or like matters of pride like motivate their behavior in a really like short-term or emotional kind of way. I think that they would recognize that in the current global order, Trump has shown himself to be not at all shy about inflicting different kinds of instability or, you know, of being disruptive to the world economy in any number of ways. We've seen tariffs, we've seen military operations in a number of different countries. I feel like what the most likely response from China is that they will just remain fairly quiet, and they will just kind of wait and see how this plays out. Maybe they will be a little bit more reticent when it comes to reschedule this. Maybe they will, if they do come back to the negotiating table with Trump, you know, maybe they'll be less generous, and maybe they will perceive this as giving them a kind of upper hand. They'll maybe feel like, well, if Trump wants to meet with us, then he needs to come back, and like he needs to present a case for it being worth our while. But we'll have to see how that goes in the coming months.
Right. I suppose we'll find out at the end of April, which is when Mr. Trump, speaking to reporters at the White House with Takaichi by his side, said he would be going to Beijing at the end of April, I believe. Thomas, the Trump administration, it noted its first case of dissent, if you will, with regard to the military operation against Iran. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, so this was Joe Kent is his name. He was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center, and he resigned his post and, you know, wrote a letter basically saying he, you know, couldn't support the action in Iran, and laid out that, you know, what did not present an imminent threat. I mean, he basically blamed it not really on Trump, but saying that it was pressure from Israel and the, you know, powerful Israel lobby in America that was kind of misleading Trump, and, you know, that was kind of how he framed it. But yeah, it was a notable departure, and it's kind of, you know, caused a lot of observers to try and you know, figure out what's going on. There does seem to be this splintering in the MAGA support base. You know, he immediately went to see Tucker Carlson, the broadcaster, who's been very, very anti the Iran war. You know, Megyn Kelly, another voice, has been against it. Marjorie Taylor Greene, who you know, congressperson who originally split based around the Epstein files, you know, she's also been vocally against it. And so we are seeing this kind of break in that base. Started mainly with the Epstein files and this Iran war. And, you know, one thing that Trump ran on was no more wars in the Middle East, or some of his supporters really supported that, you know, releasing the Epstein files. So there's definitely supporters that seem to be, you know, straying or being alienated by that. But at the same time, you know, his polling support among MAGA and Republicans is still quite high. I mean, support for the war itself is low generally. I mean, you see different polls, but it's mostly underwater. You know, it's mostly kind of, see it from like the 20s to the 40s, maybe support, and most of the against is in the 40s. And also, you know, kind of split very much by the parties. So, you know, a really unpopular start. Usually presidents get at least a little boost at the start of the war. But, you know, it's already unpopular. I think the bigger takeaway is, like, I've heard people talk about this almost compared to Obama, where, you know, very different, but Obama was a type of singular almost leader that could bring these disparate sides together in one person. And Trump seems to be able to do that. He's kind of got the MAGAs, he's got the more traditional wings of the Republicans, like, and, you know, he's sort of personally able to keep them all together. But I think there's a sense of, if he's not around, you really could start to see, you know, the splintering. I mean, people are looking at the midterms as maybe this first example of how that's going to play out. But yeah, we're seeing interesting cracks maybe in sort of maybe jostling for power or positioning in a kind of a post-Trump world, I think.
Right, the midterms in November this year.
In November, yes.
All right, Thomas, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. As always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Stephen, thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, that brings us to the end of this week's editions of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. Have a great weekend, and do join us again same time next Monday for our panel session on BTS's comeback concert that is taking place tomorrow night.
Yeah.